All right, so we are live here tonight. Thank you very much for tuning in. The talk of the day is Syria, and I am with the guest today, Wissam Coley. Wissam Coley is going to be my guest for the night. The main reason I asked Wissam to join me tonight is because I see a lot of rhetorics out there against what happened in Syria. We call the Syrian revolutions, December 8th. I already read and heard and watched a lot of reports. A lot of some Canadians are concerned what's going on in Syria is not the right things. Um, and really, I'm just got a little bit shocked by all the comment I read, and I feel like people are already, whether they're pre-programmed or they're already talking about the new Syria based on their past experiences. So I feel like we need, as Syrians, myself, and Syrian Canadian, to try to explain to our Canadian viewers what exactly happened in there and make sure they at least understand where we're coming from as Syrians ourselves, because we feel like for the last 12 years, 13 years, media painted Syrian revolutions in a very dark brush. And unfortunately, now I see that the same things is start to happen again. I don't know how right I am on this, but I would like to chat with my friend Wissam about this. Hi, Wissam, how are you?
Hi, Sam. I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
Wonderful. Just before I start in English, I want to say a few words in Arabic. شباب الحديث كله اليوم بالعربي مع وسام ومع بعض الأصدقاء الآخرين للحديث عن الهجوم الشرس اللي أنا عم شوفه على اللي حصل في سوريا والكلام السلبي وربطه بالسي اي اي وربطه بامريكا وربطه باسرائيل وانه هذا ارهاب وهذول ارهابيين فاوريدي هذا الكلام بلش يكتر كثير هون عنا وبجوز وسام يكون واحد من الناس اللي يعني يناقشني بهذا الموضوع بس نحن كسوريين كنديين لازم يعني لازم نحكي ولازم ننخرط بالحديث اللوكال دايالوج بالحديث مع اهلنا بكندا ومع مجتمعنا الكندي حتى نوضح للناس شو عم بصير وبنفس الوقت ندافع عن الانجازات اللي حققها الشعب السوري من ديسمبر من اذار 15 2011 لحد الان. Sorry about this intro, but I do have to give a heads up. So, Wissam, I mean, I picked you as to be a guest, or I really asked you to join me, and I'm glad you did that. I really do appreciate this because I feel like you are the face, not a face, but you are very outspoken of the new Syria. You kind of you're just seeing it from a lens that most Syrian don't see it in the same way. So, would you please? I just like, would you please tell our audience what exactly where you stand and what happened in Syria? And then I want to through this conversation, I'll explain as well my thought on it and why I see a lot of Canadian are not seeing it the way it is.
Sure. Yeah, happy to do that. Thanks, Sam. And I apologize that my Arabic is not good enough to conduct the interview in Arabic, so I
Oh, that's
appreciate you accommodating me. And I heard, I caught bits of how you introduced it in Arabic, and I'm satisfied you gave a fair introduction there. Well, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of conflicting things to say about what's happening in Syria. Um, I start by saying, I have seen all kinds of different opinions about this online from Syrians and non-Syrians. I will say one thing I am not seeing a lot of is defenses of Bashar al-Assad. I'm not seeing very many people on either side of this discussion
Mm-hmm.
really going to bat for Assad, which kind of
Mm-hmm.
reflects that no one went to bat for Assad. Putin didn't go to bat for Assad. Iran didn't go to bat for Assad. Hezbollah. I don't think anyone is really pro-Assad anymore. I'm not seeing this. I'm
Okay.
seeing, a discussion now about like what happens next in Syria. And there is definitely a rhetoric of questioning whether this is better or worse for Syria, which I think is a bit of a simplistic way of approaching that
Okay.
debate. Actually, I think it's a lot more complicated than that.
Right.
Now, what you're referring to, there's been some chats on, in the
Here
Calgary
and
WhatsApp
there.
groups. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's honestly all across social media. Look, the truth is, Sam, Syria has been such a divisive question for all of us, for the entire
Right.
Arab world, the entire Muslim world, the entire left, all of us, especially for the last 13 years, it has really divided and fractured the entire movement of whether it's the Palestinian solidarity cause, even other areas of the left, even other groups in the left. Organizations have literally split over this.
Okay.
And it was largely to do with, in this sort of vulgar way, are you with the regime or are you with the rebels? um and I will say it, I went back and forth during the years of the civil war between these two positions. I'm not going to pretend that I had a consistent position, and things also changed. you know
Right. You
um
don't mind these comment, do you? So
I
since you
don't.
could,
I'm afraid I would need
oh, I
to
just want to make sure
translate. But do you
we
want me
get to the
to?
audience in
Yeah, yeah,
English as
sure.
well.
I'm
Okay.
sorry, my Arabi's not good, guys. I went to Islamic school for 8 years. I did not pick up almost anything from it.
No
So
worries.
I'm
No
sorry. If
worries.
you want me to reply to any of these, you'll have to
No, no.
translate.
If there's a need to reply, and I'll read it for
Yeah.
you. But go ahead, please.
Okay. So, and I mentioned this to you on the WhatsApp group. Congratulations, first of all, for getting rid of Assad.
Okay.
Congratulations. This was
Well,
a
it didn't sound like
long
you're.
struggle.
It didn't sound. You kind of. It
Yeah.
felt like you're sorry that Assad is gone. You're sorry the Assad regime is gone. Maybe the Assad himself is not important to you, but obviously, what the Assad regime stands for, it sounds like really important to you more than the suffering. Sorry about this, more than the suffering, and the pain and all this. I would say 61 years. What happened in Syria. This is not didn't start in 2000 or didn't start in 1970. It really started from 1963 onward,
Mm.
and I see a lot of people, especially from the left side, and even the right side. They are really just all of a sudden the right side and the left side both agree the Assad regime was a good regime because the alternative in their mind was the terrorists or the extremists. And I hear it from you saying that too. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be misinterpreted here. I'm not in favor of the regime. I do have some concern. It. I think of it a lot like Iraq. You know,
okay,
when Saddam was overthrown,
right.
I don't think there was anyone really shedding a tear for Saddam. It was as brutal as Assad. Okay, he's as
Well,
bad.
yeah,
And
yeah,
honestly, the Ba'ath Party is gone, and good riddance. This has been a blight on
right.
the Arab people, and it's done now. Yeah, and the question though is, and the concern is, after Saddam, what happened to that country?
But I don't
You
think
know,
the comparison is fair because what happened in Iraq is completely different. What happened in Syria, you're completely skipped 13 years of it's a
mm,
revolution, a
mm,
struggle of internal ferno in Syria that led to all the way to the ousting of the regime a few days ago versus foreign forces in Iraq invading the country that collapses in 24 hours or less, where a regime was not even supported. We know, me and you, we know Saddam Hussein. Yes, he was it was a minority government, governed a majority people, just like in Syria. But the dictatorship of Saddam Hussein, in my opinion, didn't really have a strong base, didn't have a strong bond or connections with the base. So that's why everything collapses in nanosecond. But in
mm,
Syria, we've been dealing with this for the last 13 years. So this is the outcome of 1 million plus victims, 13 millions of refugees, so many displaced, so many people disappearing. I mean, photos from prisons is just like it's shocking. So you can't really compare what happened in Iraq and what happened in Syria and say, okay, well, here you go. The imperialism is coming after them. The we know in the end who's behind this. I agree with that. I see really the Zionists, the Jewish Israel is just benefiting from everything and anything happening in the Middle East. I see that. I agree with that, including the invasion of Iraq in 2003. So now in Syria we see that. But I don't think it's fair to compare the topple of the Saddam regime with the success of the Syrian revolution.
I mean, that's with all comparisons, there are going to be some things that are similar and some that are not, right?
Right.
The concern though is really like what happens next in Syria, and it looks a lot like Assad's base also is not really there. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
similarly, this regime also fell very quickly, very suddenly.
Exactly.
But I also want to just sort of temper that assessment also by
Right.
saying whatever the difficulties that have happened and the changes that have happened within the rebellion and the anti-regime forces,
Mhm.
who have been very mixed, and I think there are some troubling trends within that side of this, but
Right.
credit where credit's due. This is an achievement of the Syrian uprising. There was a
Okay.
genuine uprising in Syria at the beginning of the Arab Spring, and its
Yeah.
aim was to change the government, to reform, or to topple the
We'll have to
dictatorship.
say peaceful
Yeah,
uprising.
yeah, you're right. Yeah, um, and I don't say
That
that it needs to. I'm not opposed to an armed
yeah.
resistance strategy to oppose a dictatorship anyway. But and at that initial uprising of the people through many long years, that is what led to this
Okay.
result many years later is an achievement of that uprising. So I think actually we need to see it in that light and actually shine a bit of hope on this, that actually the Syrian people, when they rose up, and they rose up in a very united way at the beginning.
Right.
um
If you don't mind,
when
what's your definition of uprising versus a revolution? Why it's you're shying away from calling it a revolution? I know you're a revolutionary guy, so
yeah, well, I tend to use the word revolution when it's successful,
oh,
so at the beginning it was a
that's exactly my
rebellion.
point. Because you don't think this
Mm.
is a successful one yet?
Well, I'm not sure that this is a success of the
Okay.
Syrian people. This
Okay.
seems to be an imposed change,
Okay.
with a lot of support of people in Syria. There are people in Syria, but it's also very divided. And
Okay.
crucially, I don't think that Syria today has won its freedom. I think it is a step. It's an important step on the road to freedom, because there would have been no freedom with Assad there. But you
Right.
still aren't, and this is where the caution comes in for me, Sam.
Mhm.
I'm hearing a lot of people celebrating Syria is now
Yeah.
free. This is, all of our troubles are gone. I'm sorry. In my view, this is the beginning of a very, very difficult stage now, where Assad is gone. And now what you have to contend with is a country that is occupied by the Americans, the Israelis, the Turks. The Russians are still there. Iran will still have its fingers in. This is not a free Syria. This is not a Syria that enjoys sovereignty, but it is an important
Free of Assad. Can we agree on that?
free of Assad. Yes.
Okay, free of a security apparatus and all these secret services and all that fear and all this torture and um, all this like arrest at any moment of time. So free from being afraid. Syrian, is that fair so far?
Well, I think for many people who have been on the receiving end of the regime's brutality, yes, I
Right.
think that is absolutely. And I have to say, well, there are also a lot of people in Syria who are feeling the opposite, who maybe didn't feel
Not a
like,
lot, but it's normal to. It's a normal for if you were part of the killing machine of Syrian regime to feel like to be scared and maybe to fled there. I'm not saying. I'm not saying I want them to do that. No, I'm really saying, but it's normal reactions. If you've done something really horrific, killing and torturing and stealing the country's wealth, to feel like maybe it's a time for you to run away. So I think this is just a normal, just like with the Communist Party that back in Russia back in the 20s, 1917 forward. I mean, a lot of the other side is just fled the Soviet Union. I think we can agree to that.
yeah, but I just caution that, like, there are a lot of people who are afraid who were not a part of the regime. There are a lot of other groups within Syria and minority groups. I know a lot of Shia are very concerned now, not just people who were in the regime. There's
Right.
been a lot of concern. I've seen rhetoric talking about, like, are the Shia holy sites going to be protected? There was a video going around of the grave of I believe Zainab on fire. And I'm not sure, there was some questions about the authenticity of that, but this is the
Yeah,
fear that
exactly.
people are having. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's tough to know what's accurate. But this is the fear that's there, because
Right.
it's not an unfounded fear, and this is the part of the discussion that you don't really hear in the Western media at all. You get a little bit of it, that some of these groups that have now taken power. I mean, these are not really the best of the rebel side. These are not the best of the revolutionary forces. A lot of these are foreign fighters, Al Qaeda guys who are, there are a lot of people from other countries that are in Al Qaeda fatigues now
Right.
in the ruling party in this.
So I think this is I don't know, Wissam, to say these are a lot of foreign fighters and Al Qaeda fighters. I'm really I do respect your knowledge, and I do trust you do your due diligence, but because without being of defensive, what is let's say there is what's the percentage of this foreign fighters in your opinion? And I don't want to say there's no foreign fighters,
I
but
have no
let's say if
idea.
there's a 1% versus 99% of Syrian. Wissam, these are majority of them. These are the Syrian kids who were left Syria at age 10 and
Mm,
12 and lived in camps for the most part of their lives, and they return as a fighters. Okay,
mhm,
uh, maybe they are disciplined in a certain way. Maybe yes, some the leadership was affiliated with Al Qaeda before, and publicly it's not like they're hiding their true whatever, but in the end, there is a 12, 13 years of work behind this, whomever now taken over, to say what exactly Syria is heading. And I don't think it's fair to brush it that Al Qaeda led revolution. Al Qaeda, in my opinion, Wissam, I was in Syria when the Al Nusra Front start to appear. I was in Damascus, watching, hearing, talking to people in the street of Damascus, and all of a sudden, all what I hear is a Nusra Front, a Nusra Front. And do you know who were talking about Nusra Front the most at that time? It was the Syrian regime TV officials, and everybody looking, who is this Nusra Front? Who are these? So we felt like the Nusra, it was just like it's like a it was like it's like a Trojan horse was really needed for the regime to say this is not a revolution, this is not a peaceful revolution, this is an Al Qaeda, this is a terrorism, this is a Islamist and all the stuff. The state media pushed so hard for the name Al-Nusra Front. And we were just asking why they're doing this. I mean, I'm one of the people who said, what the hell is going on here? Like, why the government keep talking? Everything is just directed in the Nusra Front. As if the regime at that time, 2012 onward, need that kind of infiltration, because that will legitimize their brutality, in my opinion. And honestly, I think this is where the whole thing started. So I'm not disputing the infiltration of al-Nusra from the beginning. The question is, who really sent it to Syria? Did they come on their own, or was it invited by the regime? Was it sent by the
Well,
Iraqi? Was it sent by the CIA?
but
Was it? We
we
don't
know
know.
the answer. We do know the answer. The
I don't know.
CIA
You go
the
ahead.
CIA has admitted that it sent
Right.
hundreds of millions of dollars to train Syrian rebels, and
Where? Syria,
American.
whatever, where?
It's Operation Timber Sycamore. I've shared this, and I mean, you can. This is quite public knowledge. This is not
No,
like
no. No, we
contentious.
know. I mean, we can blame on the CIA with the way we want. Personally, I think the whole jihadi movement was literally was founded by the U.S.
Mm,
You want to call it CIA is fine, and we all agreed to this back
it
in the
was, yeah.
90s, in the 80s, right?
In the 80s, yeah, well, it started in Afghanistan. Very similar thing in Afghanistan, right? Where they, really destroyed a country with this kind of
Yeah, but
meddling.
Wissam, when you have a millions and millions and millions of Syrian rising up and,
Mm,
and, and being killed and tortured, and I saw this in my own eyes back in 2012, 2011. Sorry, I saw this in my own eyes, and I can talk about my personal experiences later in different one. But when you have a millions of people calling for freedom and dignity, okay, karame and hurriye, and they were faced with two things: being shot at to shoot to kill and accused of being terrorists. There was not even once the regime admitted this is a revolution, or this is a justifiable request. And I think so. That's why even yourself, you keep. I mean, if we have, like, say, if we say, let's say, 200,000 rebels now, for armed rebels. The question is how many, if we want to say, are they have any tie with Al Qaeda, even though the Hayat al-Tahrir is already denounced any tie with it, but we understand this is just like, it doesn't mean nothing, right?
Mhm.
Uh, but
Yeah.
you are really undermining
Mhm.
the desire of the Syrian people and the sacrifices that Syrian people did to achieve this. Under what excuse? This revolution was infiltrated by the CIA, and that's what I have a problem with.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to undermine anyone's achievements. Like I said, this is an achievement of the uprising in
Right.
2011 that has led to Bashar's ousting. Um, you know, first of all, like I actually agree with you. You made a comment earlier in the threads when we were talking before this stream that you made a similar point now that Al Qaeda and you know, Nusra Front and all of these groups were a gift to Assad because it allowed him to say this is a foreign trained jihadi element. There's an armed element here that can't be reasoned with. And I agree with you completely. And I think this kind of reflects the problem that I have. And, you know, for me, there's a reason why the US has to be seen as central to this discussion because in my mind, as long as American imperialism continues to control our region, we can never have a step forward. You know, that original movement
Mhm.
was broadly, it was extremely popular. You know, it was not as divisive as the movement became. And the movement became divisive because these Western backed, CIA backed, you know, Salafi groups went into Syria and started attacking minorities. They started attacking even other rebel groups. I mean, there was a lot of infighting. You know,
Yeah, but
I mean, how many different fronts of the revolution have there been? How many different groups? You can't even count. You know, and you know there were areas where groups like ISIS
Mhm.
still hold control of territory in Syria. There were places where people, as the regime was taking cities from ISIS, that people were expressing some relief that at least now this isn't ISIS. Because, yes, the regime is awful. They torture anyone who speaks out against them. They're sectarian, they're corrupt, extremely corrupt. But
Right.
ISIS has slave markets. ISIS will, you know, kill people in the streets. And unfortunately, I'm already seeing this now. I don't know if people are seeing these videos, but we are already seeing videos of executions, videos of people that are accused of being connected to the Ba'ath Party executed. I've seen some very distressing stuff, and I don't want to repeat all of it, but
Right.
this is what's causing the fear. Now, I don't know how prevalent it is, but there is definitely a fear that we're not out of the woods yet here because this group that's taken power is not gonna, you know, I know that the leader Jolani is talking about new turning a new leaf, a new Syria. We don't want to have the revenge, the sectarianism, but we haven't seen that in practice yet. That's not
Okay.
happening.
So we just let's if you don't mind, just let's stop on this ISIS things. So I mean, who do you think ISIS were killing? And why do you have anything to say about the ISIS? Because I'm for us Syrian, ISIS is the regime. ISIS was founded by the regime. There was as a heaven sent tools to the regime to turn the whole revolutions upside down and to turn the whole world against the Syrian revolution. You know, and I think you do. A lot of these ISIS leaders were freed from Assad prisons and the Iraqi prisons. Do you agree to that?
Yes, yeah. My understanding is that some of them were freed on demands from the rebels, but yes,
So
I know that's
the
the case. Yeah.
majority of those fanatic were released in the first 2 months of the revolutions. We know people who walked into the Syrian prisons as just a normal, casual, normal. I don't want to secular, but just like a normal Muslims, and they came out of prison completely radicalized. So this radicalization, this radical Islam, if you want to call it that way, in my mind, in my opinion, and I can justify it from what I've seen in my own country. I think it was created. It was a tool that needed in the hand of regional power to to carve any way, any road, any regimes to do any operations. I literally feel all these radicals, Muslim movement, especially those ISIS and Al Qaeda, they are. We call it a division of Assad. It's like we call it as you know what we call it the فرع مخابرات Daesh, as if like they were created and supported. ISIS were killing the rebels, Assad was killing the rebels, and then even those the allies when they attack, when they start like created this Daesh movement. Do you so my what I'm trying to say here is Daesh was killing or they were killing more rebels than the regime, more than Syrian forces, and I think this is like well documented.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, there was definitely a lot of infighting, and they were again, these were not good for the Syrian
But
people at
don't you
all.
think the Assad regime benefited from the ISIS?
Oh, absolutely. In that they were able to point to ISIS and justify not making any concessions, not making any changes,
Right,
nothing, right? They
right.
did nothing. Like, this is why I think a lot of people just abandoned Assad, even from the process. It's very poor leadership, right? It's just not, but the thing is, it's possible that Assad may have supported, I haven't seen, I don't know that theory, but definitely the United States sending hundreds of millions of dollars to rebel forces, which included Al Qaeda, and American politicians have talked openly about this. There's actually a WikiLeaks cable that's been making the rounds now on social media, which showed under Barack Obama, a policy advisor sending an email to Hillary Clinton saying Al Qaeda is on our side in Syria. They were aware of this. You may remember John Kerry gave an interesting speech where he said, what we were doing in Syria was handing weapons and training to Al Qaeda. So this is, for perhaps the Syrian regime played a role in propping them up, but hundreds of millions of dollars in CIA training also, I think, played an enormous role in putting these people there. And guess what? This is now people who came from that training and from those assets and those organizations have now been put in power in Damascus by Washington.
I just feel this is very unfair to all these millions of people who sacrifice their lives and think they don't understand how the game is going on in the Middle East. Yes, we do understand there's a bad apples out here and there. Yes, we do understand, or I should say I do understand Al Qaeda affiliations with the CIA and the secret forces. We do think ISIS literally was a creation of the Iran, Iraq, and the Syrian regime, no doubt, because they are the most beneficiary of it. The transitions from being a terrorist all the way into the hero of the Syrian revolutions, which is, I'm talking about Giuliani here. That's something I'm trying. We'll have to see the actions, but all what I know is this: there is an overwhelming joy among majority of Syrians about what happened and how quick this 53 years of regime, Assad family's regime just collapses. Wissam, despite like how you see it, as if this is all an orchestrated from outside, why do you think the regime within 12, 13 days was completely, from top to bottom, from north to south? How you explain that if this is just like if we want to say this is a plan by a foreign entities, why do you think they completely disappeared, washed, it's just like gone in 13 days? From your observation.
Well, just to clarify first, I'm not saying this was entirely foreign made. There is obviously an enormous amount of support within Syria for the overthrow of Assad. There's no question. There's genuine, organic Syrian support, and it's in among a lot of Syrians, perhaps a majority. I don't know the number, but what I do say though is that it is divisive. It's not unanimous, and there are others in Syria who are. I don't think anyone's really that sad about the fall of Assad. Maybe there's some people, but I think that overwhelmingly, it's divided. It's very divisive. Now, why did the regime fall so quickly? It had been weakened a lot, right? There's a lot of strategic questions at play here. The United States had maintained sanctions on Syria since that time. which really crushed the economy. And this is something that people say, even if you're against Assad, the problem with sanctions is that the regime will always protect itself. I saw on CNN there was a clip of them going through one of Assad's, the regime's luxury car lots, and there's just
Mhm.
sports cars lined up as far as you can see. And it's like, so at the same time as the sanctions were crushing Syria and people were really struggling,
Mhm.
it also doesn't help that the United States has been occupying all of the areas in Syria where there are the oil fields and the wheat fields, and
Mhm.
have been stealing those resources from Syria and continue to do so. By the way, the U.S.
Well,
is
the Assad was also taking all that oil resources.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
it's never been part of
Everyone
the
was
strategic.
pillaging. Everyone was pillaging Syria, but this undermined Assad's support. And let's be honest, even earlier, Assad stayed in power because of foreign support, the support of Russia, the support of
Thank you.
Hezbollah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
So we agree to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Oh,
he's not just
completely.
he's
Yeah.
just not like an innocent of not being also a puppet of the
No,
east or west. It doesn't really matter.
absolutely. And Sam, this is the problem: is that our region of the world
Right.
has everyone's fingers in it. Everyone, whatever
Yeah.
your opinion
Okay.
is, okay?
Okay.
Every country, okay? Syria has the Americans in there, the
Mhm.
Israelis in there, the Russians, the Iranians, the Saudis, the
Yeah.
Egyptians, everyone's in everywhere.
Yeah.
Same with
Right.
Lebanon, same with Iraq.
Yeah.
We can't have sovereignty, because every place that anyone tries to establish sovereignty, Western imperialism destroys it. And
So
there are a
let's
lot of
agree.
forces at play. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's agree whether this new regime or the previous regime, they have some ties to the to an outside forces. I mean, we don't know how deep they are, but we know they cannot rule without that support of the regional and international, especially the
Mhm.
but by the way, about the sanction, if because when I ask you why the regime tumbled like this, you mentioned only one of the reason, only the sanctions. We know sanctions were forced, and Saddam Hussein didn't really tumble it the way it is. And also Iran been under sanctions for maybe 40 years. So yes, it weakened, it has some effect, but don't you think that was the will of the Syrian people, and that's why it was just like like a landslide victory from if you want to drive a car from the north to the south, you need a day. So we're talking about cities and that I mean around like 400 500 kilometers just to drive and to liberate in 13 days. That mean really there was not only no resistance, there was already a decision, whether internally or from the outside. Its time has come for that regime to go,
Yeah.
and to this revolution to start a new phase. I
And it
think.
looked,
Do you
uh,
agree?
oh, absolutely. And it looked like even the regime had made that decision by the end, because the army didn't even fight. Even the
Well, I
army
think
gave
he
up.
lost. He lost his two legs. Like when the Russian and the Iranian, I
Mhm.
think they made a decision to say, you know what, maybe it's better for us just to stop here. Enough of what how much killing we did, and we
Mhm.
just gonna back off because there is no end to this. And just Assad is gonna say there till there's nobody left
Mhm.
in Syria except him. So obviously the decision was made. We're not going to support him,
Mhm.
and whether he made a decision to give up and surrender, or I mean leave the country, or he was asked to leave. It doesn't really matter for us as Syrian. That is a new dawn. This is a new era, and we have every right to celebrate this without being labeled as traitors, or without being labeled as we are stupid. We don't understand what's going on in the region,
Oh
and the
no,
Zionist is
I
going to
hope I
take
didn't.
over, and Americans going to take over. And I heard this from a lot of people that support the Palestinian cause, and I don't understand that. And that's something I'm going to open the topic of Palestine later on, not now. But really, I feel like a lot of people from people and I know, it's not like undermine. It's just they're just emotionless about the sacrifices that the Syrian people went through to reach this momentum. And in my opinion, they have a right to celebrate and cheer for their new era.
Yeah. Yeah, and I hope none of the language I used was that dismissive or demeaning. I mean, there are differences of opinion here, and I think that's normal.
Mhm.
We've talked, how divisive this question is. Honestly, I was a little bit worried when this first happened that these divisions are going to come up again, and what's that going to mean for the movement
Mhm.
for Gaza? I will just say, I do think there is an emotional divide that is a
Mhm.
problem in this, because there are a lot of people who have actually suffered from the regime, have their families, a lot of people who are now celebrating their family members coming out of prison, people that have been disappeared, that they thought might have been dead, that they're meeting again, people who were subjected to torture who are now being freed.
Mhm.
The fall of a dictatorship is an important, it's a monumental step in a country's history. There
Right.
are also a lot of people, though, who are feeling on the opposite end, who are feeling a lot of fear now, who are seeing the kind of images, and are also having that fear. And I think there's a disconnect between these two sides that, frankly, and this is where I want to bring in some of my optimism here, Sam. I think it's time for this division to end. I think that division was a
So, and
product.
what base?
That's a good question. But first of all, look, we must agree. I think it needs to end,
Okay.
because previously it was a division over Assad versus the rebels. And people
Okay.
would be like, who's the lesser evil? If Assad wins, then we're going to be massacred. If the rebels win, then the other side is going to be massacred. Now that question's over. The rebels
Okay.
have won. The rebels have
Okay.
won. A section of the rebels. Okay. Assad is no longer the discussion here. I'm
Not a
really
section.
tired of talking.
Majority of Syrian won. It's it's just
I
unfair
think
to say the section of a rebel. Majority of Syrian won.
here's the question I have, Sam.
Yes.
And we talked about this. I think right now, one of
Yes.
the big calls needs to be for elections in Syria as soon as possible. Because I think this claim that the majority of Syrians, I mean, do the majority of Syrians want the fall of Bashar? I think that's a fair thing to say. Absolutely. Do the majority of Syrians want, what do they call it? Hayat Tahrir al-Sham?
هيئة تحرير الشام. No,
Hayat,
of course.
Hay-
Yeah, that's
do the
that's a
majority
good
of
question.
Syrians want
Yeah.
them? I'm
Yeah.
not sure. I
I
think
agree
that
with that.
needs to be established through an
Right.
election.
Yeah,
And
agree with this.
I've seen already that the new opposition minister, the head of the SNC,
Yeah.
what's his name, Bahra, has
Mm.
said that elections will be held in 18 months, so a year and a half. That's a long time, and
Okay.
I'm not sure that we want the Americans calling the shots for a year and a half, especially as Israel is marching through to Damascus and bombing Damascus right now. That's a big problem, and we have to be clear-eyed about this.
Sorry, well, I don't mean to cut you
Mm.
off like this, but are using just word that in my opinion, just that I have to stop. When you say marching to Damascus, when you say run the show, the American running the show for a year and a half, so literally you're back to the square one. As if like we're Syrian, we are not part of it. We're just following orders and taking order from the America, or we just Israel is free to do whatever they want to do. Obviously now Syrian people themselves, they just walk and unfortunately loot some property, especially here in Damascus and all the stuff, which is, I mean, I don't want to say this is right, but we do understand now it's a very chaotic time. But I just want to emphasize, and the will of the Syrian people, where is it in this talk of yours? Yes, I do understand we need the elections, but I don't think the American will tell us what to do, nor Israel is marching. Yes, they are invading. Yes, they incur here and there, but you know what? And they destroy 80% of the Syrian arsenals, the Syrian army's arsenal, which has been sitting there for who knows 60 years to unfortunately fight the people, not fight Israel. And now, when the regime was gone, it was so dangerous for these weapons to be in the hands of rebels. So these weapons must be destroyed because it's just about to go in the right directions. And I think you understand what I'm referring to.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a very fair question. Where is the will of the Syrian people? So, is the will of the Syrian people in Hayat Tahrir al-Sham? I think that's going to depend on what they do to establish accountability with the Syrian people. Are they going to be, what that's in their hands? What is their relationship going to be to the Syrian people? I have my concerns because so far they've really not done much to defend Syria from Israel. They haven't even mentioned it. Jolani is again talking about the Iranians and Hezbollah stay
Yeah,
out, but says nothing about Israel,
I agree.
who's bombing, and so that's a problem. It's not a great indication. And also, Israel has just obliterated Syria's defenses. Like they've destroyed the Syrian navy, like you said, they've destroyed the arsenal,
Yeah,
and that puts whatever leadership is in Damascus in an
absolutely.
extremely weak position relative to
What
the rest.
the whole world is watching.
Mm,
Okay, we have to say
yeah,
this. Not only Syrian watching, the whole Arab people, the whole Muslim community, world countries watching, the whole free world is watching, as if it's okay for Israel just to do whatever they want, and we know that. So this is not a fault of Syrian people. We are not doing anything because now they are just they want to gain their because they just feel they just got the country back. So unfortunately, and sorry, I keep interrupting you,
no,
but
please
I
interrupt
like this
at
dialogue because you're just yeah, hopefully we can educate each other or we can expand the angle a little bit. Maybe I'm too emotional about it because I'm so excited seeing the people are happy. Yeah, but I do sense a danger that is really creeping in.
mm.
So
You know,
so
it's
sorry,
been
go ahead.
racked, a country racked by that level of division. Uniting it and really forming peace is a long process.
Yes.
I think, for example, like, you know, some of the regime guys should be put on trial, and I mean a proper trial. I know there was somebody tried and is now going to be hanged tomorrow.
Mhm.
You can't have a trial in one day, and these trials
Yeah,
are important. It's not like about the right, it's not just about the rights of the accused. It's
I
do
understand.
this as a public show. Bring in the evidence, let people see what's happened, let the
When you have so
victims
many
see.
videos, I don't know which one you're referring to. They're going to be hacked tomorrow,
But
but
this,
there's a tons of videos. Like the problem with some is the atrocity and the killing and the massacring in Syria was literally it's all documented by themselves. These are criminals through
mm,
video, through YouTube's and all this. So if I see somebody torturing to the death and another guy, and now he's they get captured. Do you think I'm not say justifying to go and kill or just execute whatever? I fully understand the rule of law to be implemented, but Syrian they are not Vienna of the Middle East. We're talking about Syrian, like we are part of the culture of the Middle East. You know how Arabs are hot blooded,
yeah, and
and
I'm not gonna throw myself in to
yeah,
save
but
this
I
guy.
mean, we're
Okay, I
not
don't
just not
care.
perfect revolutions and all the stuff. That's just because we're not perfect. That means we're not the right. This is not the right direction for Syria, and try
Listen,
to create doubt about the revolution.
listen, man. As a communist, I agree with you completely. If a
Okay.
revolution has problems, that doesn't negate the entire project. Okay,
Okay.
but look, it's not about proving what the regime did. Really, it's
Mm.
about putting it out in the public. Like in South Africa, after the fall of apartheid, they had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It was
Mm.
basically like they went and they did a whole cross country. They went and said, what exactly was the injustice that happened here and how do we overcome it? You
Right.
know, is Syria now going to start some kind of a process like that to really unite the country? I'll say there was today a statement by a bunch of Alawi clerics
Hmm.
saying, "Let's move forward. Let's move forward. We're not
Hmm.
interested in revenge." Okay, and they may be worried about repercussions against them, which is they should be. Everyone who is part of the regime or a minority should be worried about repercussions because there's a lot of very angry people with a lot of guns, and some of
Right.
them, you know, some of them we're already seeing what's happening. That has to, this is where we need to move forward. And it's not really for me to dictate here any of this to you and the Syrian people, right?
But
And I'm not Syrian, but
so I just want to highlight which is very important. The regime itself, it's the one who give weapons to a lot of civilians from the beginning of the uprising. So we have, we call it Lijan Shabia. See, these are the people. They were the part of the killing machine. So Syrian to have weapons originally, it was given to them by the regimes to defend the regime from falling. So I don't want to say all of them, but let's agree that there's a good portion of what's going on in Syria, in the capital of Syria, was conducted by lawless uh, citizens who just their job is just to loot and steal and I don't know about killing.
yeah. Well, this
So
is what
we don't
happened.
want to accuse. We don't because whatever happened in Damascus, I mean, the Jabhat Tahrir didn't even make it already. So. I just want to be fair in my analogy, if you don't mind. I do have a few comments that I'd like you just to to I mean, I think we have Fatima here. Too long must be 2 months. Okay, I think she's talking about the that Syria and Lebanon have no government, and this is too dangerous for the region. I don't know. I mean, I really want to stay focusing on Syria, but
Mm.
your mind just go. I could do a quick read here. Do you can you see the comment from your
I
end?
can, yeah, I can, yeah.
You cannot, or you can.
I can see them. I'm reading them, yeah.
Okay, so because you can see it, so I'm gonna leave it. I'm gonna leave it for you to pick and choose which comment you like to comment on. But I'd
Sure.
like to put this one here with the Riyadh. You are hitting on such a critical point about the fear and the image problem of the leadership. We all know that Assad regime from day one diverted the trajectory of our revolution to be armed with force, and the majority of the rebels to face situation as it is. So it really, I mean, that's exactly what I would like to say. I'd like people to know there's a lot of Syrian who see it that way. So
Yeah.
whatever comes, the rules better than the choices, yes. And that's exactly what for us, Wissam, I want to tell you something. When I was in Syria back in the 80s, after, I mean, I don't know, in the 80s, that's from the 1979 all the way, this is where the regime fangs start to really to show in the 80s, because the situation was so hard and so cruel, like especially the economic situation was so bad. I remember before I left Syria, literally, we were not me, but you can hear from a lot of people. Even we were wishing the Israel will invade Syria so we can just get rid of this regime. We know this. This is just like a talk, right? You don't wish your enemy to invade you, but I'm
Yeah.
telling you to how much we were disconnected with that regime.
And I'm not gonna pass judgment on this because when
Okay.
you're in a position of desperation, this is why I don't judge the Kurds. I think the Kurds have made some terrible decisions in trusting the Americans.
Uh-huh.
Thus, they're in a desperate position, and the Syrian people have been in a desperate position for a long time. I'm not. This is where I'm saying, we need to move past
Okay,
this
so let's agree.
revenge.
Can we
Yeah,
agree this is a revolution that was successful to topple the regime?
the regime's been toppled. I don't like using the term revolution for something that has not actually handed power over to the people. I don't
Oh,
think people have the power yet. I'll tell you what, if there's democratic elections that come out of
yeah.
this, I'll call it a revolution. I
Yeah, but
promise.
you can't have a democratic election that's just on a flag. You need
That might take some time.
it may
Revolutions take
take
time.
some time,
They said 18 months. Come back in 18 months if there's a free and fair election in Syria. I'll call it a revolution. But until then, personally,
Right.
it's too quick to tell. But I'm not going to harm.
So are
I'm
you
not
happy?
going to
Are you
say
happy?
anything and
Are you
say.
happy as we Sam? Are you happy that the Assad regime is gone?
I'm thrilled, and I will be honest. I was a little bit
Yes.
worried at the beginning, and I'll tell you why I was worried first,
Mhm.
because as we all know, Syria is a vital lifeline for the supplies going to the
Right.
resistance. Okay, everyone talks about this, and I just want to say, I totally understand the argument from Syrians saying this should not be something held against Syria. It's not for them to sacrifice themselves and their freedom for the sake of geopolitics, and I totally agree with that. I totally
Right.
agree with that. But it is still concerning to me because I don't know now what's going to happen to Lebanon and Gaza. I was very worried.
Mhm.
I worry that Gaza might now be isolated and that Israel
Mhm.
will just obliterate it. And that's
Mhm.
not the Syrian people's fault, but it's something that worries me about the situation. However, like I said before, I'm becoming a little bit more optimistic as I'm seeing this shakeout because
Oh,
I think now the West has a big problem in Syria. I
mhm.
think the West and Israel have a big problem in Syria. Look, Assad, for
Would you
all
please
the
tell me what kind
yeah,
of trouble you're talking
listen,
about?
Assad, for all the years that he ruled, there's one thing he never did, which was
Attacking Israel.
actually attack Israel. Yes, he never did it. Okay, well now Israel's gotten rid of.
So
He
now
was
you
the
know
devil
why
we
all
know.
these weapons were destroyed in 24 hours.
Yeah, they weren't being used. He should have
No,
used
no,
them.
they were being
He
used,
should have
but
used them.
in the other side, in the other directions.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Okay.
He should have. He should have. By the way, I actually have been to Syria.
Mhm.
I know you mentioned this before, but only to the Golan Heights. I went there in 2013
Oh,
when I was
beautiful.
visiting Palestine because
Oh yeah,
Israel has just annexed it. So there's no border. If you go into
yeah.
48 Palestine, you can go right up to the Golan, and Israel's just you. It's like you're in Israel, but it's a beautiful
Wissam,
part of
I
the
really
world.
want you to know that when we say Syria and Palestine and Lebanon, and this is really a lot of us. Like, I don't think this is a two countries or three countries. Like, this is a stupid one country. Like, it feels so bad to say, oh, Syria is doing this, Palestine is not doing this. It's all. It doesn't really matter. It's just a matter of time. But when you have a wound in your neck, you're not gonna worry about the wound in your heart or in your chest. It's just you have to go through the process.
Yeah.
So these Syrian regime weapon, and these are the people money was paid to buy these weapons, and then these weapons were only used to buy the cities and towns and rural area of Damascus. And we know this, not even one time since 1973, a bullet went from Syria toward Golan Heights.
Yeah.
And that's why, that's why the problem is we're saying, oh, all of a sudden these Syrian rebels are the traitors now. Oh, we're not like we're not going to defend Palestine. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. I think the biggest threat to Israel now is this revolution. This what happened in Syria. If the will of the free Syrian people literally freed, I think this is where the true, this is where the actual so-called the true. I like what I heard the gentleman on Sunday say. This is like Tawafan number 2. I can start to resonate. You know how say Tawafan 1, Tawafan 2, and I think you know what I'm talking about.
Mm.
Literally, I see this is at stage 2 of that Tawafan.
Sorry, you're
I'm
gonna
not.
have to
I'm hoping.
What's
I'm feeling
Tawafan?
this way.
Sorry,
You
can you
know what the
translate for me?
you
Yeah,
know
go
what
on.
you know what Tawafan al-Aqsa mean?
طوفان الأقصى لا sorry, my Arabic is bad.
Okay. So do you know what the name
Disasters.
of the operation that the Gaza
The
Hamas.
flood. The flood.
Yeah, the flood. It's called
Okay.
Tawafan al-Aqsa. So
Tawfan.
that was
Okay.
the flood. That the first
Mm,
wave of the flood. And I think what
mm,
happened in Syria is just a wave number 2, and you just
mm,
don't know when. If you look at it in a historical perspective, I really think something seriously and generally positive will come out of this if the Syrian people manage
mm,
to transition from dictatorship into a true democratic society where the will of the people is ruling the country
mm,
instead of dictatorship. And we do have to remember Syria since 1948 all the way till 1956 or 57. It was a democratic system with a lot of coups, a lot of government. So we are not like new to this, but hopefully we're going to succeed this time,
mm. Inshallah. And
inshallah.
you
so
know,
so so for those, I don't know if you one of them or not, for those who criticize Syrian for not supporting the Palestinian cause, or supporting or being happy to see some of their. Do you want to talk about this or stay in Syria? You don't want to go to Lebanon. I don't think we want to do this
I'll go
now.
wherever you take me, Sam. Part of the issue is we can't talk about one region without talking about the rest in the Middle East.
Right.
This is the reality. So go ahead.
I just know I really would like to, but I don't think we're done from Syria. What I mean by this is, I just want, if we can agree to one thing, is Syrian people have the right to celebrate in the meantime to what they achieved, whether the help of their other enemy or not. They are in new era that gonna be judged by the a result.
Mm.
Okay, so this is a good change. Are we
It's
a change? Okay,
Bashar being gone is a good
yeah,
change. The
okay,
new regime, we'll wait to see. We'll wait to see. But
great.
I, celebrate, please. Bashar is gone. But
Okay,
also, we need to also recognize there are Syrians who are not celebrating. There because they are
yeah,
now
yeah.
being subjected to things that are also horrifying, right?
I
And
agree with that. There's yes,
the future of the Syrian nation, unless it gets ripped apart by the US, which is a real possibility here, by the way. It's
right,
possible that Syria might not be one country if the US has its way. But if Syria is to continue, it's going to have to hold both of those reactions to this in its
right.
national history and struggle.
No, I agree. I agree with what you said. Is doing a general elections and elect a new democratic government, that would be a good sign of this is a success of this revolution. But since you feel good about the Kurdish movement, the Kurdish cause, which is I do agree that Kurdish Syrian Kurdish, they have every right to live in the means of that their culture and their traditions is protected, but as part of the Syrian, part of the bigger Syria. I just don't see having a Kurdish state a Kurdish state in Syria It's an interest for Syria as well. I only see this as an Israeli demand. I think this is part of the what the Israel has a plan in the long run for the area. So if we manage to bring Syria all together and have a free elections, we can call that a success. Is that is that fair and
Absolutely.
square?
Absolutely. But here's my concern. I don't trust the Americans to ever allow an Arab to have a fair vote.
Well, not only the American, yeah. I mean, I don't think the West has a strategic decision not to allow the natural process of our society to grow and flourish, because that's gonna just like what happened in Gaza. If you remember, when they elected the Hamas, everything was just thrown away.
Yeah.
When they all this when the election was in Algeria in 1992, if you remember, I don't know if you read the whole
I was 1 year old at that time.
yeah, I mean, just completely, just because it has some kind of Islamic flavor to it. So France just injected, I mean, ordered their
Yeah.
officers just to cancel the elections. So we agreed to this, but the question is the American trying to impose a new version of democracy in our society, or this is really we are free to decide what we want?
I think the Americans want the Syrian people to follow their orders. And I think that they're going to try and make sure that whatever regime or government emerges will be one that is completely subservient to Washington. And
Okay.
they might see democracy or some form of controlled democracy as a part of that. But free and fair elections across all of Syria, I
Yeah.
don't see it happening because, to be honest, I think if there were a free, sovereign Syria, democratically elected by the people, that the first thing that people would want to do is to end the problem of the Israeli occupation and including of the Golan Heights. I think the first thing they'd want to do is free themselves of the Americans. I think they'd want the Americans out of their land, stopping taking their oil and
Mhm.
stop taking their wheat. So is America going to allow this? I don't know. See, part of this
If
also. Mm,
yeah, if the Americans didn't take the oil away, but since they took over the northern part, probably whether you're going to be in the hand of ISIS or they had the Syrian regime, which is we know both this is a wrong things at that time, because the regime will have more time and more resources to continue his way of governing. So I don't want to say what the American did is really good, but the way I see it, I think the world is tired from seeing all these refugees fled in the Middle East and flying going to Europe. I think this is where the strategic decision was made, is we need to drain out the source of all these problems. And I think so many years of war, I think even Israel has an interest to have the area to go through, and not that not that for prosper time, it's just to slow down this killing. So maybe they feel like they won in Gaza, they won in southern Lebanon. Now I think they are all they act like they are the ruler of the region, but too bad. Arab nowhere to be found. Arab government nowhere to be found. When you say American, I mean they want to just tuck orders. I think the question is which government in the region that is not taking order from the state.
from the United States.
Yeah,
Well,
there may be a little bit Iran, but that's about
yeah,
it.
yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's pretty. Well, it was Syria for a while, and now
And
it's
now we
Syria.
see Iran is going into the direction where they're trying to create some kind of like a new relationship with the West. And
Yeah,
we don't know how far that's going to go.
they're realizing they're in a bad position. They're trying to, they realize the United States. This is a big strategic victory for the U.S. so far.
Yeah.
It might backfire on them. I think there's a good chance of that. But so far, this axis of resistance that
Mhm.
people have talked about, that has taken a blow, whether you like the term or not. That alliance has taken a big blow here.
Right.
Um, Again, it's not for Syrians to answer for that. But what I will say is I think at this stage, part of how this all shakes out is going to depend on the movements and us as
Mhm.
well. Like also the movements here. Part of my concern is like, where does this leave the Palestine movement? And also, I kind of want to say, like, there should now be a movement for Syrian freedom in the West. We should be
Agree.
demanding, we were doing weekly protests for Gaza, and then
Mhm.
Israel invaded Lebanon, and now we started talking about Lebanon and Gaza and Palestine as a whole. And now Israel's invaded Syria, and I think now let's talk about Palestine,
They-
Lebanon, and Syria. This needs to end. Well, I don't know what Israel's plan is. I don't know what Israel's plan is. They might be planning to just demolish. Who knows? They already bombed the passport office in Damascus. You know why you bomb a passport office is because you want the country to be unable to control its borders so that anyone can go in. That means
Mm.
now the Israelis are going to have spies in there, and the Americans and the Saudis and the Iranians, and everyone's going to have spies in there.
I did
I
not
don't know
hear
what Iran's
myself
plan is.
bombing the passport office. I don't know yet, but I'll check my because I'm not up to date today. So,
Yeah,
but
they
yeah,
bombed
this
it,
is a very
destroyed it.
legit question. Is we have to do something now to stop the Israeli invasion and on all these areas.
Yeah.
But I think in the meantime, because we think we're almost an hour, we don't want to extend beyond that for now. I think when we see a Syrian talking about their revolution, they're happy. I think at least let's give them a space to at least not enjoy. They've been suffering for so long, and they pay hefty price. There's a lot of victims. There's a lot of uncertainty about so many people. So really now it's time to give Syrian time to not to heal their wound, but at least to breathe instead of being attacked from it day one as you're a traitor for the cause of Palestine. You are just a puppet of the West, or you are just in line with the Israel against this, against that. It's just like, my goodness, if you think a regime was the resistance movement, it wasn't the regime, it was the people. Just like in Egypt. Egypt government made an agreement in Camp David. But do you think the Egyptian people agreed to this? None. It's just like it's only on paper. So why you think Syrian people was just gonna be you know hanging dandy with the Israel, even if the government will say we're gonna make peace. But what the Assad regime did, and so many killing and so many destroyed the whole country. Like, honestly, when you look at what happened in Gaza, do you think we think of Gaza? No, we think of what happened in our. The whole world was watching. Like, I don't think you protested against the Assad regime yourself. You were just watching the Assad regime destroying country after country and just a dropping bomb left, right, and center. So that where the change start to happen. You say, what the hell are you doing here? Like, if this is government, is really for us to govern us or just to kill us. So that's why because even Israel up till that time they didn't do what the regime did. But now we see, when I look at Gaza, I don't know, is this Homs? Is this Aleppo? Is this Dara? Or this is Gaza? Well, I don't know. They all look the same to me now.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's going to be a long process to rebuild. And you know, Syria is now without an army. It
Yeah.
is without basically a functioning full
Yeah.
government.
Yeah.
It is going to be at the mercy of the West for a while, I'm afraid to say, and we'll see how
Yeah.
the international community
Maybe at the
shakes out.
mercy of Turkey too. Yeah. Well, yeah. I
And
mean,
Turkey,
well,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So, to me, like, the struggle continues,
Yeah.
and I think it's very important now that we build a united front, like a united front and a united movement around where we go forward. Because actually, we have a lot of maybe disagreements about the past, and not just between you and me. I mean, between all of us. There's, how
Mhm.
fractured this debate is, but I think we can come to a lot of agreement about the future. And
Yeah.
in the chats we were having before, I outlined a few things that I think we can all agree on. And I think that, if we make that the foundation of an agreed way forward, and granted, I defer to Syrians on this, but here are my suggestions. I'm Lebanese anyway, so like you said, it's Syria. We don't recognize this
Yeah.
colonial border. I'm a pseudo-Syrian anyway, so here's my pseudo-Syrian, recommendation. One, I think we have to protect the right of Syrian refugees in the West. This is now
Okay.
becoming a problem. Already we've seen Germany, Austria, the UK, they're all saying they're going to cancel asylum applications.
Mhm.
They're saying Austria, I saw, is now talking about deporting people, Syrians,
Mhm.
back to Syria. That shouldn't be allowed. We need to fight to protect
We
Syrians who
agree.
are here.
Yeah.
If you want to go
Totally.
back, it should be a right to go back. But if you want to stay, you must have the right to stay. And so I think it's important that we fight for that. I also think we should be clear about like what the conditions are in Syria, that it's not all great
Agree.
yet. So
Okay.
just so that these refugees still have the rights. And so far, Canada hasn't said they're going to not do that. They're going to do the same thing. They haven't said yet. But if Pierre Poilievre gets in, all bets are off. I could totally see him saying we're going to get rid of Syrians in Canada now. By the way, I mean, maybe not. I hope
He's
not. But
he's way into pro-Israel, but as you said, we just have to say and wait. When would not be judgmental? I don't
yeah,
think he will. He will. He will.
I will
Nobody in
say,
Canada. Nobody in Canada talking about want Syrian refugees away, gone from Canada.
well, unfortunately, I will say
They are
this.
Canadian already. I mean, they already have a citizenship. They already maybe they're gonna stop the new refugee from coming in.
I'll tell you,
But
Sam. I'm gonna send you a link that, if you can bring it up on screen. This is from the Global Calgary tweet about the protest on Sunday for
right.
Syria.
Okay.
I read the comments on this. Okay, these are average Calgarians commenting.
Can you put it in a comment on
Yeah, I
this?
put it in the private comments chat. Is it, or can you
You
can
put
you
it in
see
a private.
private
Yeah,
chat
okay.
on the StreamYard? Do
Yeah.
you see it? It's a
I'm
tweet
just
from
opening it
Global.
right now.
Yeah. So the image doesn't show up on my screen for some reason, but it's from the protest on Sunday, 2 days ago.
This is Global News, okay?
Yeah. And
So
if you
let's
scroll
see.
down to the comments,
Right, just 1 second, please. Share screen.
sorry, I don't know. Technically, it's
I don't know
not.
if you see it now.
Yeah. If you scroll down and read some of the comments there,
Okay.
if
I
you're
just
able
want to make
to.
it. I want to make it like a bigger.
Sure,
But
sure. Sorry, this is a technically complicated thing to make a relatively minor point, but
that's okay.
I can just read them out for you if you'd like. They're really
Go ahead.
awful, and I just want people to know that this is what Calgarians are saying about this now.
Okay.
So if
Yeah.
you scroll
Yeah.
down,
Go ahead.
Yeah, can you see the comment tweets below it?
I just don't see
Okay.
any comment,
I
unfortunately.
don't know why they're not showing it. I'll read them for you.
Yeah,
Okay?
read it for us, please.
So this is about Syria being freed from Assad. Perfect. They'll be happy to go back there then. So they're leaving soon. That's great. Maybe it's time to go back. Time to send them back to their families. Send them back now. Revoke refugee status and ship them back. Now they can go back to Syria if they want. Go
Right.
celebrate at home. We don't want to see them start gathering. Make sure this isn't a regular occurrence. If they are there tomorrow, the cops better be too. They can celebrate at home like normal people. This isn't their third world trash.
Wow.
Yay, now head back over there. You can go build up your country and give up your Canadian passport. See ya. Bye. Now they can go home, win-win. So
But this is not a Pierre Poilievre saying this. This is a comment. Like average people
the average
saying that.
Calgarian. Yeah.
Average Calgarian saying that. Yeah.
It's scary. It's
scary, very scary. Yes.
What I'm saying is we need to be fighting this. We need to have a movement that is demanding Syrian refugees are allowed to come into Canada and are allowed to stay, and no deportations, right? So that's one thing that I think we can all unite around.
Right.
The other things are end to the foreign occupation and the sanctions. The sanctions are still in place. And this is where I say, the US still holds the leadership in its control. It's got the sanctions in place. It hasn't lifted them yet. Why not? Bashar's gone. Lift them now. No conditions. Because if they keep the sanctions in, they're just going to use that to control things. So get the sanctions done. Get the foreign occupation out. Americans out. Israelis out. Russians out. Turks out. Everyone out. Okay,
right.
That should be our demand.
Well, that's really our aim, to be honest with you. So yes.
And
but
then
we do agree this is going to take time. Whether a month or 2 months or 3 months and all this stuff.
And
but
then
also,
democracy.
Yeah. So far, all I'm agreeing on your point. I like this. We have to go ahead, please.
That's it. Those are the 3 points. Refugee rights, end to the sanctions and occupation, and elections. And it might take a long time, but I think just like with Gaza, we should be out there. We should be loud. We should be insistent, and we should not let them sleep on this, because I don't know what the next few days are going to hold. I don't know where Israel's going to stop, if Israel's going to stop. Syria is sitting helpless. Syria is sitting helpless in front of the Israelis, who are on a like a bloodlust war path and have been for over a year. So
Anyway, so you said your 3 points. I'll talk about 1 point for now, because I think it seems to me like we agreed on really the principles of the conversation and the dialogue here today. But I like, just because you have a large followers and people are looking up to you in this fight, especially in justice issues. I would say global justice movement. I don't want to call it communist, because the communist has a really bad resume. With all due respect, I don't want to go into this now, but let's agree. You do have followers. You do have people listen to you and go by what you say. I really think Syrian people deserve deserve, I don't want to say to be a tap on the shoulder, but at least given a break, because they really suffer so much and struggle so much until they reach this point, if we call it for us as a victory. For you, as looking from the outside, I fully understand your concern, but it's too early to say, okay, Syrian, show me the result. Oh, you didn't have a democratic system yet. You didn't go and defeat this. You didn't go and fight for that. You didn't do. This is now is just a new era that even our Syrians, our like people ask me, what do you think? I say, it doesn't really matter what I think, because let's finish from stage one, then we'll think about stage two. It could be worse, could be whatever, but I don't want to Syrian situation, a revolution, I should say, to be judged by what happened in Libya, or what happened in Yemen, or what happened in Iraq, because this is a completely different. Maybe if this regime was toppled in 2011, I would say yes, that argument will be right. But we're talking about 13 years after the beginning of this, with millions of, we don't want to repeat the same word. So this, the price already paid, and Syrian, or both sides are tired. Both sides of the Syrian conflict decided, you know what, enough is enough. And now we just want to, we want to flip the page and start a new beginning. The question is, under what conditions, under what rules, and how many with us, and how many can agree, and all this stuff. So it's up to the Syrian people to show the world that they can do it, they will make it, and they will set a new example in the region, instead of the previous example, either me or the terrorist. And that how this is how the regime sold himself to the West. If you don't keep me in power, those terrorists, they're going to come to rule instead. And I think that, so when you talk to your friends and colleagues and stuff, just, you know what, I think we need to give them time to and then we judge by result. You can't judge by the result, because Israel invaded Damascus today, because you know what, this is, if Syrian within the capital are stealing and looting public properties, so what do you think Israel is going to do? It's a historical chance. The question is how we're going to gain him back, and I mean, anyway, it's a long way to go to be judged if it was like from your perspective. So
Of
I'd
course.
like you to be more friendlier toward the new change in Syria, because people now they have only one thing in their mind, is their prisoners, and where all these people who disappeared, and just go and find mass graves, and also just to have some stability, so we can start talking about government elections and all that stuff.
Well, hey, no tears shed here for Assad. And I agree. It's a new Syria. It's a new Syria, and there are going to be new divisions. And I'd very much like to see all of us move past the old divisions, because I think those are going to hold us back from fighting for sovereignty. I'll just put in a word for those people who are worried from Syria, and I think the one thing I'll say is we should be more. I like I said, there's the emotional divide, and those of us who maybe don't have the experience of having people taken by the regime should be more sympathetic to the feelings. And I'd say on the flip side, those people who are having concerns, they need to be allowed to express that too. And especially, we should be talking about some of the really, really nasty stuff that's happening in Syria with sectarian violence that's emerged now. Not as a condemnation of Syrian sovereignty, but to acknowledge that this is complicated, and we need to move past all of this for the future of Syria, and for, frankly, the future of the whole region. And the last thing I'll say is, and this might be, I don't know, I hope this isn't controversial. You can't trust. You can't trust the Americans. That's the last thing I'll say. You can't trust the Americans. The Yanks cannot be trusted. They'll stab you in the back.
As a communist yourself, I mean, what do you expect?
Trust them. You can't trust the Americans. Don't trust any foreigners. Get everyone out. Syria for Syria. Yeah, get the Russians out. I don't care.
Don't trust nobody. Don't trust nobody. Keep the word trust away, and just see results, and just judge by the results.
Let the Syrian people decide. Let it be in the hands and the power and the control of the Syrian people. The day we have that, that'll be really a new day for Syria.
Wonderful. Thanks, Wissam, for joining me tonight.
Thank you so much.
Maybe I'll have you later on talking about the Hezbollah Syria Gaza stuff, but today it's just Syria. So because
Okay.
I've
Anytime.
seen
Thank you.
a lot of stuff need to talk
Yeah.
about. Wonderful. Thanks to have you here tonight. Thank you very much, Wissam. We'll see you on another one, inshallah.
Thank you so much, Sam.
For whomever watching this podcast tonight, thank you, and thank you for tuning in for all this time. Please try to share it if you like it, and help us out in the future with support what I'm doing here. And my message to my fellow comrades, Syrian Arabs, especially those Syrian, راح بحكي هلا بالعربي انه we do have to get engaged in with our Canadian communities in their own language, speak to them, explain it to them. And this was my way of trying to address it, and hopefully I was successful to have some at least new ideas about with a few people. Syrian, Arab, those who speak Arabic, if we keep talk to each other only بالعربي and leave the بتقولوا بصفي هيك الساحة فاضية بصراحة راح نخسر كثير لأنه أنا مثل ما حكيت عم نسمع كثير حكي outside about كل هدول ارهابيين، هي مش كويسه، minority majority، يعني اوريدي الوست عم بيتهيأ لمرحله، وانا بتصور يعني في مصلحه لاسرائيل بهالموضوع هذا، بحيث اذا هي الحكومه الجديده اذا ما راح تكون يعني لمصلحه اسرائيل فممكن دول يقولوا انه هدول ارهابيين وهالقصص هاي، واذا كانوا بابت للوست ولاسرائيل فمعناته بضلوا والله مثل الحكومات العربيه الاخرى يعني بيسقفوا له كذا. فلازم نحن السوريين الكنديين والعرب الكنديين، لانه هذا يعني ما بقدر اقول فلسطيني ولا لبناني ولا سوري، بصراحه بلاد الشام مع احترامي لكل يعني الاقطار العربيه اللي كلها واحد، ولكن هلا بدنا نركز على بلاد الشام. يعني احنا عمليا بلاد الشام كلها، فلسطين، لبنان، سوريا، كلها بغرفه العمليات، ماشي. وانت ما راح تضل مريض متسطح على طاوله شو اسمه، اللي بيحط لك الانعاش بيتحكم فيك، اللي عم بيقصك بيتحكم فيك، اللي عم بيحط لك التخدير بيتحكم فيك. لازم نصحى كعرب من بلاد الشام، وإن لنا دور، وبالذات هون بكندا نوضح موقفنا، ندافع عن حقوقنا، ونكون مهيئين لكل شيء راح يصير في المستقبل ان شاء الله. الف مبروك لاهلنا بسوريا نجاحهم، ونتمنى الفرج لاهلنا في غزه. وانا شخصيا بتمنى للبنان مرحله جديده يكون فيها شعب اللبناني بكل اطيافه سعيد ومبسوط. انا حاسس بنوع من التفاؤل. شو مصدر هالتفاؤل هذا ما بعرف، ولكن اللي حاسه انه بس سوريا تكون بخير، فلسطين راح تكون بخير، ولبنان ان شاء الله راح يكون بخير. اسعد الله اوقاتكم وتصبحون على خير. سلام عليكم.